The little girl's screams echoed through the dark Brooklyn alley as four masked figures closed in around her. Blood stained her torn pink dress. Her tiny fists pounded against her captor's chest while tears streamed down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "I want my daddy," she sobbed, her voice barely a whisper. The shadows seemed to swallow her cries. But the woman who stepped out from behind the dumpster wasn't just another bystander. She was Sarah Vance, a rogue CIA operative who had been hunting the child's father for 3 years, the most dangerous Mafia boss in New York, and what happened next would shatter everything she thought she knew about her mission. Stay with me until the end, because this story will prove that sometimes the most dangerous enemies become the most unexpected allies. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. It's a humid Thursday evening in downtown Manhattan, August 2019. The warehouse district stretched for 12 blocks of cracked concrete and broken streetlights, where honest business ended and the Moretti family's empire began. Sarah Vance had been tracking intercepted phone calls for 6 weeks, following a trail of coded messages that led to this forgotten corner of the city. At 32, Sarah possessed the kind of athletic grace that made her invisible in crowds but lethal when necessary. Her shoulder-length auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Dark eyes that missed nothing scanned the alley through night vision goggles. She had been CIA for 8 years before going rogue 6 months ago, when her superiors ordered her to abandon the Moretti investigation. Some cases became personal. Some monsters needed to be stopped regardless of politics. Dante Moretti controlled 60% of the East Coast drug trade, laundered money through 14 legitimate businesses, and had walked free from 7 murder charges due to witnesses who mysteriously changed their minds. He operated from a fortress-like mansion on Long Island, surrounded by loyal soldiers who would die before betraying him. The FBI had been trying to penetrate his organization for 15 years. They had failed because they didn't understand that Dante wasn't just a criminal. He was a father. Sarah pressed herself against the brick wall as voices echoed from deeper in the alley. She had been following a lead about a drug shipment when she heard the child's cries. Protocol demanded she maintain her cover. Her mission was too important to risk for one innocent victim. But Sarah had never been good at following protocol when children were involved. The 4 men wore ski masks and carried military-grade weapons. They spoke in hushed tones about ransom demands and sending messages. One of them, a heavy-set man with scarred knuckles, grabbed the little girl roughly by the arm. "Stop squirming, you little brat. Your daddy's going to pay big for this." The child couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Blonde curls framed a face that would have been beautiful if not for the terror etched across her delicate features. Her pink dress, torn and dirty, suggested she had been grabbed from somewhere safe, somewhere normal. A playground, maybe, or the steps of a private school. This wasn't random street violence, this was targeted. Sarah recognized the tactical significance immediately. Kidnapping a rival's child was the nuclear option in organized crime. It meant someone was either desperate or confident enough to risk everything on one devastating blow. Either way, innocent people suffered while criminals played their games of power. But Sarah had learned long ago that sometimes the only way to stop monsters was to become something darker than they were. She slipped the safety off her Glock 27 and stepped into the alley. 3 years earlier, Sarah's world had shattered in a hotel room in Prague. She had been deep undercover, infiltrating a human trafficking ring that stretched from Eastern Europe to the American heartland. 18 months of careful preparation, false identity, fabricated background, trust earned one brutal transaction at a time. The operation was going perfectly until her handler, Deputy Director Marcus Kane, decided the mission was too dangerous. He ordered immediate extraction, claiming new intelligence suggested the trafficking ring was connected to terrorist organizations. Sarah knew he was lying. The real reason was political pressure from above. Someone important was getting uncomfortable with how close Sarah was getting to the truth. But Sarah couldn't walk away. Not when she had identified 3 safe houses holding 47 children between the ages of 6 and 14. Not when she had memorized the faces of victims who trusted her to save them. Not when extraction meant leaving behind evidence that could free dozens of innocents. She disobeyed direct orders and stayed. The trafficking ring was dismantled within 72 hours. 47 children went home to families who had given up hope. The case made international headlines as a triumph for American intelligence. Sarah never received credit. Officially, she had been reprimanded for insubordination and transferred to a desk job analyzing financial records. Unofficially, Marcus Kane made sure she understood that heroes who disobeyed orders didn't have long careers in the CIA. That night in Prague, Sarah learned that her own government would sacrifice innocent lives to protect political relationships. The people she served cared more about maintaining stability than saving victims. Justice, she discovered, was often incompatible with policy. From that moment forward, Sarah operated by different rules. She followed orders when they aligned with her conscience. She ignored them when they didn't. And she accepted that eventually, this approach would cost her everything she had built. 6 months ago, that bill came due. When Director Kane ordered her to abandon the Moretti investigation, just as she was making breakthrough discoveries about the family's international connections, Sarah made a choice that ended her official career forever. She walked away from the CIA, taking with her 3 years of intelligence about America's most untouchable criminal organization. Now she was a ghost, using stolen resources and burned identities to hunt a man the government had deemed too powerful to prosecute. Sarah had nothing left to lose, which made her more dangerous than any official agent could ever be. But standing in that alley, watching a terrified child beg for her father, Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about Dante Moretti might be wrong. The first gunshot echoed off brick walls like thunder. The heavyset man spun and dropped, clutching his shoulder. Sarah moved through the shadows with practiced efficiency, her weapon trained on the remaining 3 kidnappers. "Federal agent," she called out, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Drop your weapons and step away from the child." The men hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for Sarah to put another round into the leg of the one closest to the girl. He went down screaming, his weapon clattering across broken concrete. "Next one goes center mass," Sarah announced, her aim shifting between the 2 remaining figures. "Your choice." The kidnappers scattered like roaches when the lights come on. They abandoned their wounded colleagues and their victim, disappearing into the maze of alleys and loading docks that honeycombed the warehouse district. Sarah let them go. Chasing them meant leaving the child alone with 2 injured men who might recover enough to cause problems. She approached the little girl slowly, her weapon lowered but ready. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. What's your name?" The child looked up at her with enormous blue eyes that seemed too old for her age. "Bella," she whispered. "Bella Moretti." Sarah's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just any kidnapped child. This was Dante Moretti's 7-year-old daughter. The little girl she had just saved belonged to the man she had been hunting for 3 years. The man whose organization had killed 12 people in the past 6 months. The man Sarah had sworn to destroy. Bella reached up with tiny arms, seeking comfort from the stranger who had rescued her. "The bad men said they were going to hurt me. They said my daddy wouldn't love me anymore if I was broken." Sarah knelt down, her tactical training warring with maternal instincts she didn't know she possessed. "That's not true, Bella. Your daddy loves you no matter what. Nothing could ever change that." The words felt strange coming from her mouth. For 3 years, Sarah had thought of Dante Moretti as nothing but a monster, a criminal who destroyed lives for profit. But monsters didn't have 7-year-old daughters who wore pink dresses and called them daddy. Monsters didn't inspire the kind of fierce loyalty that would make grown men search every inch of the city when that little girl went missing. As if summoned by her thoughts, the distant sound of car engines echoed through the warehouse district. Multiple vehicles moving fast, spreading out to cover every possible escape route. Someone was coming, and they weren't taking any chances. Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her intelligence contact. "Heat signature shows 12 vehicles converging on your location. Moretti family soldiers, heavily armed, ETA 4 minutes. She looked down at Bella, who was clinging to her tactical vest like a lifeline. The smart play was obvious. Take the child and disappear. Use her as leverage to get close to Dante. Complete the mission she had sacrificed her career to pursue. But looking into those frightened blue eyes, Sarah couldn't bring herself to see Bella as a tool. This was someone's daughter, someone's world, someone's reason for getting up every morning and trying to be better than the darkness that surrounded them. The first black SUV turned the corner onto their street. Headlights cut through the darkness like searchlights, sweeping back and forth across loading docks and alley mouths. Sarah had maybe 90 seconds before they found her. "Bella, I need you to listen very carefully," she said, checking her ammunition and scanning for escape routes. "I'm going to make sure you get back to your daddy safely, but there might be some scary noises first, okay?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "Are you going to fight the bad men?" "If I have to," Sarah replied, surprised by the honesty in her own voice. "But mostly I'm going to make sure you're not scared anymore." The second SUV appeared at the opposite end of the alley. Sarah realized with growing certainty that escape wasn't possible. Not while protecting Bella. Not without resources she didn't have. The smart play was surrender, but surrender to the Moretti family usually ended with shallow graves and missing persons reports. Unless she could make them see her as an ally rather than a threat, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She picked up Bella, walked to the center of the alley and waited for Dante Moretti to find his daughter. The third SUV screeched to a halt 20 feet away. Doors slammed open and armed figures emerged, their weapons trained on Sarah with military precision. But these weren't random street soldiers. Their movements spoke of professional training, coordinated tactics, and absolute loyalty to their commander. A fourth vehicle arrived, this one different from the others. Armored but understated, expensive but not flashy. The kind of transportation used by someone who had enemies but refused to live in fear. The rear door opened, and Sarah found herself face to face with the man she had been hunting for 3 years. Dante Moretti was younger than his file photos suggested, maybe 45, with dark hair showing streaks of silver at the temples. His expensive suit couldn't hide the athletic build of someone who had fought his way to power rather than inheriting it. But what struck Sarah most was his eyes. They held the same fierce intelligence she had studied in surveillance footage, but now they were filled with something she hadn't expected. Raw, desperate love for the child in Sarah's arms. "Daddy!" Bella called out, struggling to free herself from Sarah's protective embrace. Dante's entire posture changed in that instant. The calculating crime boss disappeared, replaced by a father who had thought he might never see his daughter again. He stepped forward, his hands raised to show he carried no weapons, his focus entirely on the little girl. "It's okay, Princess," he said, his voice gentle despite the violence that surrounded them. "Daddy's here now, you're safe." Sarah found herself studying his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What she saw instead was genuine relief, parental love so pure it seemed to illuminate the darkness around them. This was not the monster she had expected to find. "Mr. Moretti," she said carefully, "your daughter is unharmed. The men who took her are neutralized. I'm going to set her down now, but I need your word that we can talk before anyone starts shooting." Dante's eyes met hers for the first time, and Sarah felt something shift in the air between them. Recognition, maybe, or mutual respect between professionals who understood the rules of their respective worlds. "You have my word," he said. "Anyone who brought my daughter home safely has earned at least that much." Sarah placed Bella gently on the ground. The little girl ran straight into her father's arms, tears streaming down both their faces. Dante lifted her up, holding her as if she were made of spun glass, whispering reassurances in Italian that needed no translation. For a moment, the warehouse district disappeared. The armed men and armored vehicles became irrelevant. There was only a father who had thought he lost everything, holding the child who made his life worth living. Sarah watched this reunion and felt something crack inside her chest, something she had protected with cynicism and professional distance for 15 years. Dante Moretti was supposed to be her target, not a man whose love for his daughter could bring tears to her eyes. When he finally looked up, his expression carried a mixture of gratitude and curiosity that Sarah found unsettling. "I don't know who you are," he said, "but I owe you a debt I can never repay. My daughter is my world. Without her, nothing else matters." "I'm just someone who was in the right place at the right time," Sarah replied, acutely aware of the weapons still trained on her from multiple directions. Dante studied her for a long moment, his eyes taking in her tactical gear, her practiced stance, the way she kept her hands visible but ready to move. "You're not just someone," he said quietly. "You're someone who knows how to fight. Someone who chose to risk her life for a stranger's child. That makes you someone I want to know better." He turned to address his men without taking his eyes off Sarah. "Stand down. This woman saved Bella. That makes her family until I say otherwise." The weapons lowered with reluctant precision. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, the barely controlled violence that lived just beneath the surface of Dante's organization. These men would die for him without question, but they clearly didn't trust anyone outside their inner circle. "What's your name?" Dante asked. Sarah hesitated for a moment that stretched like eternity. She could give him any of dozen false identities she had cultivated over the years. She could disappear into the night and never see him again. She could complete her mission from a distance, using traditional surveillance and investigation techniques. Instead, she chose truth. Sarah. Sarah Vance. Dante nodded, as if her name confirmed something he had already suspected. "Sarah Vance, you just became the most important person in my daughter's life besides me. That comes with certain responsibilities." "What kind of responsibilities?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "The kind that require trust," Dante replied. "The kind that require you to understand that some things are more important than whatever brought you to that alley tonight." Sarah looked down at Bella, who was still clinging to her father but watching Sarah with obvious affection. The little girl had formed an attachment to her rescuer that would be difficult to break. More importantly, Sarah realized she had formed an attachment in return. "I understand," she said, meaning it more than she cared to admit. "Good," Dante said. "Then you'll understand why I'm going to ask you to come home with us tonight. Bella won't sleep unless she knows her guardian angel is safe. And frankly, neither will I." The invitation was both an offer and a command, issued with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to having his wishes become reality. Sarah knew she should decline. Walking into Dante Moretti's home was exactly the kind of dangerous decision that ended careers and lives. But looking at Bella's hopeful expression, Sarah found herself nodding. "Just for tonight," she said, "to make sure she's okay." Dante smiled, and for a moment Sarah glimpsed the man he might have been in a different world. "Just for tonight," he agreed. As they walked toward his armored SUV, Bella reached out and took Sarah's hand. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered. Sarah squeezed the small fingers gently. "Thank you for being brave," she replied. Neither of them knew that this moment would change everything, that the rogue CIA agent and the Mafia boss would discover they had more in common than either could have imagined. That love could grow in the darkest places, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world was caring about someone you were supposed to destroy. The Moretti mansion sat on 15 acres of manicured grounds overlooking Long Island Sound, hidden behind gates that belonged in a medieval fortress. Sarah counted at least 12 security cameras on the approach alone, plus motion detectors, armed guards, and what appeared to be military-grade perimeter defenses. But what struck her most was how normal the interior felt. Family photos covered the walls. Bella's artwork decorated the refrigerator. Children's toys were scattered across expensive Persian rugs. This wasn't the sterile fortress she had expected. It was a home. "Princess, why don't you show Sarah your room while I make some calls?" Dante suggested, as they entered the main foyer. Bella grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her toward a curved staircase. "I have a dollhouse that's bigger than a real house," she announced with 7-year-old enthusiasm. "And a fish tank with 16 fish. I named them all after Disney princesses." Sarah allowed herself to be led upstairs, acutely aware that Dante was watching them, with an expression she couldn't quite read. As they disappeared around the corner, she heard him speaking quietly into his phone in Italian, making arrangements, she assumed, dealing with the aftermath of his daughter's kidnapping. Bella's bedroom was exactly what Sarah would have expected for a billionaire's only child. Enormous, beautifully decorated, filled with enough toys and books to stock a small store. But what caught Sarah's attention were the personal details that no amount of money could fake. Hand-drawn pictures taped to the walls, a teddy bear worn soft from constant hugging, a reading corner with blankets arranged just so. "Daddy reads to me every night," Bella said, noticing Sarah's examination of the book corner. "Even when he has important meetings, he says I'm more important than any business." "That sounds like a good daddy," Sarah said carefully. "The best daddy," Bella agreed with absolute certainty. "He protects people. Bad men try to hurt our friends sometimes, but Daddy makes sure they can't. He says protecting your family is the most important job in the world." Sarah felt something twist in her chest. Out of the mouths of babes came truths that shattered carefully constructed assumptions. For 3 years, she had thought of Dante as nothing but a criminal. But what if he saw himself as a protector? What if his empire existed not just to accumulate wealth and power, but to create safety for the people he loved? A soft knock on the doorframe announced Dante's arrival. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, his tone warm and paternal. "Sarah likes my fish," Bella reported seriously. "I told her about story time." "Did you?" Dante's eyes met Sarah's with something that might have been amusement. "I hope she understands that story time is sacred in this house. Nothing interrupts it." "Nothing?" Sarah asked. "Last month, 3 federal judges wanted an emergency meeting," Dante said, sitting down on Bella's bed and pulling his daughter onto his lap. "I told them they could wait until after we finished Charlie and the Chocolate Factory." Bella giggled. "They were so mad, but Daddy said judges need to learn patience just like everybody else." Sarah found herself smiling, despite everything she knew about Dante's criminal activities. Watching him with his daughter revealed dimensions of his character that didn't fit any profile she had studied. This wasn't calculation or manipulation. This was genuine love for a child who clearly adored him. "Princess, it's almost bedtime," Dante said gently. "Why don't you get ready for story time? Sarah and I need to talk about grown-up things for a few minutes." Bella nodded solemnly. "But she's staying for story time, right? And breakfast tomorrow and maybe forever?" Sarah felt her heart clench at the hope in the little girl's voice. "I'll stay for story time," she promised. "We'll figure out the rest later." After Bella disappeared into her bathroom, Dante and Sarah found themselves alone for the first time since the alley. The atmosphere shifted subtly. 2 professionals acknowledging the complexity of their situation. "She likes you," Dante observed. "She's a special kid," Sarah replied. "You've done a good job with her." "I've tried. Being a single father in my line of work isn't easy, especially when people target your family to get to you." Sarah heard the pain in his voice and realized this wasn't the first time Bella had been threatened. Her mother. Cancer. 3 years ago. Dante's expression darkened. "The doctors said experimental treatments might have helped, but insurance wouldn't cover them. Too expensive, too risky. I had enough money to buy the best medical care in the world, but it was too late." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Dante's criminal empire hadn't corrupted him into a monster. It had made him wealthy enough to save his daughter's life in ways he couldn't save his wife's. How many fathers would make that choice? How many wouldn't? "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "That's when I learned that the world is divided into 2 kinds of people," Dante continued. "Those who protect what they love and those who follow rules while watching everything they care about disappear. I chose protection." Sarah understood the subtext. He was telling her why he had become what he was, justifying choices that had led to violence and criminality. But he was also testing her, trying to understand whether she could accept moral complexity or only saw the world in black and white. "Protection has a price," she said carefully. "Everything has a price. The question is whether you're willing to pay it." Dante studied her face intently. "What's yours, Sarah Vance? What price are you willing to pay for something you believe in?" The question hung in the air between them. Loaded with implications neither of them was ready to explore. Sarah realized that Dante knew exactly who she was, or at least suspected strongly enough to be testing her reactions. This wasn't casual conversation. This was an interview. "Daddy!" Bella called from the bathroom. "I'm ready for story time." The moment dissolved as they returned to their roles as father and guardian angel. But something fundamental had shifted between Sarah and Dante. They had moved from strangers to something more complex, something more dangerous. As they settled into the reading corner with Bella between them, Sarah realized she was no longer hunting a criminal. She was falling in love with a family, and that changed everything. The story Dante chose was about a brave knight who saved a princess from a dragon, only to discover that the dragon was actually protecting her from something worse. Bella fell asleep halfway through, curled against Sarah's side with complete trust. "I'll carry her to bed," and Dante whispered, but Sarah shook her head. "Let me," she replied. "I want to." As she tucked Bella under her covers, the little girl stirred slightly. "Sarah, are you my new mommy now?" The question stopped Sarah's heart. She looked at Dante, who was watching from the doorway with an expression she couldn't read. "I'm your friend," Sarah said gently. "Someone who cares about you very much." "Good," Bella mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. "I love you too." After they left Bella's room, Dante led Sarah to his study. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Sound, where moonlight turned the water into liquid silver. The room was lined with books, dominated by a massive desk covered with papers and photographs. "Now we can have our real conversation," Dante said, pouring 2 glasses of wine without asking if she wanted any. Sarah accepted the glass but didn't drink. "What conversation is that?" "The one where you tell me why a CIA agent was in that alley tonight, and why she's been tracking my family for 3 years. The words hit like ice water. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon before she caught herself. Dante noticed the movement and smiled grimly. "I know who you are, Sarah. I've known since you gave me your real name in that alley. The question is whether you know who I really am." Sarah set down her wine glass, her mind racing through exit strategies and contingency plans. "I think I'm beginning to." "Good, because we need to discuss what happens next." Dante moved to his desk and picked up a manila folder. 3 hours ago, you saved my daughter's life. 2 hours ago, your former handler, Marcus Kane, put a kill order on you through back channels. 1 hour ago, he offered me $5 million to eliminate the rogue agent who's been investigating my organization. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Kane had burned her completely, turning her into a target for the very people she had been hunting. And I told him that anyone who threatens someone under my protection becomes my enemy. Dante's voice carried deadly certainty. "Congratulations, Sarah. You just became the safest person in New York City, as long as you stay here." The implications crashed over Sarah like a wave. She had saved Dante's daughter and accidentally aligned herself with his organization. Kane's betrayal meant she could never return to her old life. Her career was over, her safety compromised, and her only ally was the man she had been ordered to destroy. "Why?" she asked. "Why protect me?" Dante's expression softened as he looked toward the stairs where his daughter slept peacefully. "Because Bella loves you. Because you chose to save an innocent child when you could have walked away. Because in your position, facing men with guns, you thought about her safety before your own." He paused, meeting Sarah's eyes with intensity that made her breath catch. "And because I think there might be something worth saving between us, something worth protecting." The words hung in the air like a promise and a threat. Sarah realized she was standing at a crossroads that would define the rest of her life. She could try to leave, fight her way out, and spend whatever time she had left running from both the CIA and the Moretti family. Or she could stay and explore the impossible connection she felt with a man who should have been her enemy. "What are you offering?" she asked. "Partnership? Protection? A chance to build something real with people who understand what it means to choose family over everything else?" Dante stepped closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes. "A chance to be the mother Bella already thinks you are." Sarah felt tears she hadn't cried in years burning behind her eyes. For 15 years, she had served a government that ultimately betrayed her. She had followed orders that compromised her conscience and sacrificed personal relationships for missions that ended in political convenience rather than justice. But standing in Dante's study, she saw a different path, a chance to protect someone who deserved protection, a chance to love someone who needed love, a chance to belong somewhere that valued loyalty over politics. "And if I say yes," she whispered, "then tomorrow we start building a new life, together, all of us." Sarah looked out at the moonlit water, then back at the man who was offering her everything she had lost. "Together," she repeated, testing how the word felt. "Together," Dante confirmed, and she knew he meant it. When Sarah kissed him, it felt like coming home to a place she had never been but always belonged. When he kissed her back, it felt like a promise that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. Upstairs, Bella slept peacefully, dreaming of guardian angels and families that choose each other. Outside, the world continued its endless struggle between order and chaos, justice and survival. But inside the Moretti mansion, three people who had found each other against impossible odds began building something that neither law enforcement nor criminal organizations could touch. They began building home. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of the Moretti mansion, watching through the window as Dante taught Bella how to swing a baseball bat in their backyard. The little girl's laughter carried on the morning breeze, pure and joyful, and completely unaware of how close she had come to losing everything that mattered. The FBI had officially closed the Moretti investigation after Marcus Kane was arrested for selling classified information to foreign governments. Sarah's name had been cleared posthumously after intelligence documents revealed Kane's conspiracy to eliminate agents who threatened his illegal activities. As far as the world knew, Sarah Vance had died a hero, killed while protecting national security. The woman who lived in the Moretti mansion now was Isabella Romano, Dante's wife of 3 months and Bella's adoptive mother. The identity was completely legal, backed by documents that could withstand any scrutiny. Dante's connections had proved remarkably useful for someone who needed to disappear from her old life entirely. "Mama Sarah, look," Bella called out, connecting solidly with the ball Dante had pitched underhand. "I hit it!" Sarah clapped and cheered from the window, her heart full of love for the family she had never expected to find. Dante caught her eye and waved, his smile warm with the contentment of a man who had everything he needed. The newspapers still wrote about Dante Moretti occasionally, usually describing him as a businessman with rumored connections to organized crime. Nothing they printed was entirely wrong, but nothing captured the complete truth either. He was a man who had chosen love over power, protection over profit, and family over everything else the world might offer. Sarah's former colleagues would never understand how the woman who had spent years hunting criminals could fall in love with one. But they had never seen Dante reading bedtime stories to his daughter. They had never watched him prioritize a little girl's happiness over billion-dollar deals. They had never experienced the fierce loyalty of someone willing to risk everything to keep the people he loved safe. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged in the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who understand what really matters, and sometimes the best families are the ones that choose each other against all odds and never look back. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove love can bloom in the darkest places, and that sometimes the most important battles are won not with weapons, but with the courage to care about someone else more than yourself.